Some may say this is just a piece of string, a rakhi, a few threads of cotton and silk, sometimes a bead, different decorations, tied around a wrist in about 10 seconds. And yet this little string carries over 2,000 years of stories of gods, devas, asuras, of a queen and an emperor, of a poet trying to hold a fracturing country together. Here's the part most people never hear. Not all of these stories are about brothers and sisters at all. This, friends, is Raksha Bandhan. Let's find out its story. Let's start with the words Raksha Bandhan because they tell you what everything is about. Raksha means protection. Bandhan means a bond, an unbreakable tie. So Raksha Bandhan, as you can guess, is literally the bond of protection that can never break. It falls on Shravan Purnima, the full moon day that closes the month of Shravan, the great monsoon month. It's one of the holiest stretches of the year for bhakts of Sri Siva. Now, one thing to note, the exact date may differ. Different parts of India, different states, and elsewhere in the diaspora, the way and the date the festival is celebrated can definitely change. It depends on local panchangs, local calendars. So Raksha Bandhan isn't just floating in the late summer. It's actually the bright binding note the whole holy month is building towards. And the ritual everyone pictures is this common famous one. A sister ties a decorated thread, a rakhi, around her brother's wrist, prays for his well-being, and he in return promises to protect her. A gift, a sweet, a vow, some prayers perhaps. But that neat picture is only the surface. Underneath are layers of much older and much more fascinating, sometimes strange stories. And in one of the oldest of them, there isn't even a sister who's in sight. Because the very first protective thread, some traditions say, wasn't tied by a sister at all. It was tied by a wife on a battlefield of the gods. One of the earliest stories comes to us from the Puranic tradition, retold in texts like the Bhavishya Purana. The gods, the devas, are losing a war against the asuras, their enemy. Indra, their king, is on the brink of defeat, and it's his wife, Sachi, also called Indrani, who acts. She takes a sacred thread, empowers it with prayer, and ties it around Indra's wrist as armor. He returns to battle and he wins. So notice what this thread here is and what it means. Here, it's not what it's popularly known as. It's not a symbol of or a token of siblings' affection. It's a shield. It's a blessing woven into cotton, tied on by someone who loves you, who wants to carry you safely through danger. That arguably is the true root of this festival. The raw idea of Raksha, protection, long before it was even framed around brothers and sisters at all. You can even see that older meaning surviving today. When people in the modern world tie rakhis not to siblings but to soldiers, to teachers, to gurus, anyone they're sending a prayer of protection towards. So when did the thread become a sibling's thread? Well, for that, we go to two of the best love stories in our tradition, and one of them is a promise that gets called in at perhaps the worst possible moment possible. The first story is actually not that one. It's a quiet and tender story. It's about Yam, or Yamraj, the god of death. He hasn't visited his sister, the river goddess Yamuna, in a long time, some say years. When he finally came, Yamuna, his sister, was so overjoyed that she prepared a grand feast and tied a thread on his wrist. Yam was so moved and so touched that he offered her a boon, a vardhan. And the story goes that he granted her a form of immortality, and he declared that any brother who receives such a thread from his sister and pledges to protect his sister would himself be blessed with a long and healthy life. So that's the moment the thread became clearly a unbreakable bond between siblings, between a brother and his sister. The second story is the most famous of all, and it contains a beautiful twist. In the epic, the Mahabharata, Sri Krishna cuts his finger. It starts to bleed. Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, a strong female character, she immediately tears a strip from her sari and binds the wound. Touched, Sri Krishna promises to always be there to protect her. Now, hold on to this promise because the epic pays it off unforgettably. When Draupadi is dragged into a royal court and an attempt is made to dishonor her, to disrobe her before everyone, she calls out to Sri Krishna. And her sari simply keeps unspooling. It's endless. No matter how many times it's pulled, it never ends, so that she can never be stripped. This is a promise made over a torn strip of cloth that is kept by God himself, Sri Krishna, in honoring and defending his sister. But here's the twist, right? Sri Krishna and Draupadi were not brother and sister by blood. The most iconic bond in the whole festival is between two people who chose each other out of devotion, love, and respect, which tells me something that the ritual itself probably is always known. Raksha Bandhan was never really about biology, who's related to you by blood. It's rather about the promises we make to the people who we're devoted to and who we decide to protect. And once we start to see it that way, that it's a bond that you can choose, or perhaps you can start to notice the thread being tied across some very surprising lines. Let's share with you another story. And this is the story of Sri Lakshmi and the great king Bali. Now, you need one piece of backstory for this one to land, so let me quickly bring you up to speed. Bali was an asura, a demon king, but he was a very famously generous king, a very righteous and kind king, and also very powerful. In fact, he was so powerful that Vishnu himself came down as an avatar, Sri Vaman avatar, the dwarf, to humble him and reclaiming the three worlds in 3 cosmic strides. That's a story for another time. But as a result of this, even as he lost everything, Bali kept his word. And Sri Vishnu was so moved by that integrity that he offered him a vardhan, a boon. So Bali asked for the one thing he wanted, that Sri Vishnu come and stand guard at his door, that he bless him. Which is how the preserver of the universe, Vishnu, he ended up as the Asura king's gatekeeper. And how the goddess Lakshmi ended up without her husband as well. So Sri Lakshmi, she came to Bali's palace in disguise, and she tied a thread on his wrist. When he offered her a gift in return out of gratitude, she revealed herself and she asked for her husband back. And King Bali, who was bound by his word once again, because he was a righteous king, he honored the thread and he let Sri Vishnu go with Lakshmi ji. So here's the Rakhi that isn't sibling love at all. Here it's a sacred contract of honor between a goddess and a king. Then the tradition steps, and Bali, a righteous king, bound by his word here once again, he honored the thread and he respectfully allowed Sri Vishnu to stop being his gatekeeper and go with Lakshmi ji. So here, the Rakhi isn't about sibling love at all. It's rather a sacred contract of honor that's happening between a goddess and a king. Then the tradition steps or progresses from these epic stories and into more recent history. There's a much repeated tale that in the 16th century, Rani Karnavati of Mewar in modern-day Rajasthan sent a Rakhi to the Mughal Emperor Humayun, asking for his protection against an invader, and that he set out to help her. It's a lovely story about a thread creating an obligation across faiths and kingdoms, but historians note that it doesn't appear in the contemporary records and is very likely a later, more romantic retelling. So enjoy it as tradition, but not as documented fact. The same goes, even more so, for the charming legend that Roxana, the wife of Alexander the Great, well, she sent a Rakhi to the Indian king Porus or Puru to spare her husband in battle. That one doesn't really have the best historical footing at all. But nonetheless, these are stories that are fun to read and to listen to and share. But there is one moment where the thread, the Rakhi, really did step onto the stage of history. And it had nothing to do with siblings and everything to do with holding a country together, holding India together. This next part is about a poet who used this thread, this Rakhi, against an entire empire. In 1905, the British partitioned Bengal, a move widely seen as splitting the province along religious lines to weaken it. And the famous poet Sri Rabindranath Tagore did something remarkable in response. He turned Raksha Bandhan into a public act of unity. He called for Hindus and Muslims to walk to the river and to tie Rakhis on one another, as neighbor to neighbor, as community to community, and as a living refusal of the line the empire was trying to draw between them. A refusal of letting divide and rule work against them. So in that moment, the thread became something huge. It's not just a private promise that's between two people, but now it's a public one between entire communities, saying that, look, we're bound together, that we're going to protect each other, and we're not going to let politics get to us. Here, this Rakhi, this thread of protection, had become a thread of unity and solidarity. And that instinct to send protection and belonging along a single strand, well, that's exactly why today Raksha Bandhan is such a popular, large-scale and vast season all on its own. Millions of Rakhis boxed and posted across India and around the world every Shravan, with sisters mailing threads across whole oceans to reach a brother they can't sit beside. Or perhaps a 10-second ritual that has grown a global supply chain. Sisters and brothers, even if they can't be together, through virtual technology, still celebrating. See, because the thing that it delivers, a small woven promise, that's something that people will cross any distance to send. So the next time you see that little string, remember what it's really carrying. It's carrying so much. It's carrying a wife arming her husband, a god, for war. It's a sister's boon of immortality. A demon king, an Asura king, honoring his word. A poet defying an entire empire, and promise that was made over a torn strip of cloth that was kept by God himself when it mattered the most. That promise keeper, Sri Krishna, is the most beloved protector in the whole tradition. He's known as a butter thief, a friend, a philosopher, divine beloved. And he himself is the one who immortalized Raksha Bandhan. Until then, dear viewers, thank you so much for watching as usual. Please share your thoughts and your questions that you have. We love to hear them. We hope that this Raksha Bandhan and all the others are really special and allow you, whether you're celebrating with your siblings or whether you're celebrating with those who you want to protect, may they be blessed and may they be full of light. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.